Ma'am, step away from the executive elevators. ID, now.
You're shouting at the owner. Call building security and verify it.
Owner, don't play games. Hands up, don't reach for that bag.
You asked for ID. You're escalating this on purpose.
That's enough. Turn around. You're under arrest.
Officer Kyle Rigg had been a patrolman with the Chicago Police Department for 6 years when he made the decision that would implode his life and cost the city of Chicago $6.5 million. He was 32 years old, aggressive, and entirely confident that his badge gave him the final say in any dispute. On a crisp Tuesday morning in the financial district, he walked into the lobby of the Meridian Plaza, responding to a call about a trespasser. The trespasser was Eleanor Vance, a 54-year-old real estate titan who was currently standing near the elevators checking her email on a tablet. What Rigg did next, ignoring her calm demeanor, laughing at her claims of ownership, and placing her in handcuffs in the lobby of the building she literally built, would become a defining moment in the national conversation about authority and bias. Before we dive into the details, tell us, where are you joining us from today? If you believe that justice should be blind to color, but not to facts, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are committed to telling the stories that the system tries to hide. Meridian Plaza is one of those buildings that screams power. Located in the heart of the Loop, it features a 3-story atrium, Italian marble floors that are polished twice a day, and security guards who look more like Secret Service agents than rent-a-cops. It was 8:45 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. The lobby was humming with the energy of high finance. Men in 3-piece suits and women carrying designer briefcases streamed through the revolving doors, swiping their badges at the turnstiles and rushing toward the elevator banks. The air smelled of expensive cologne and roasted coffee from the high-end cafe in the corner. Eleanor Vance stood apart from the rush. At 54, she possessed a stillness that commanded attention, though not the kind she was receiving that morning. She was dressed in a charcoal wool coat over a cream silk blouse, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into an elegant low bun. She wasn't wearing flashy jewelry, just a simple vintage watch that was likely worth more than Officer Rigg's annual salary. She was standing near the private executive elevator bank, which required a special biometric keycard to access. She was waiting for her chief financial officer to come down so they could review the schematics for a new penthouse renovation. Eleanor had been standing there for perhaps 10 minutes. She hadn't spoken to anyone. She hadn't harassed anyone. She was simply existing in a space that she owned. But for Officer Kyle Rigg, who had just parked his squad car in the loading zone and marched through the front doors, her presence was an anomaly that needed correcting. He spotted her immediately, a black woman standing still in a sea of moving white faces. In his mind, she was the obstruction. He adjusted his belt, puffed out his chest, and made a beeline for her. "Ma'am, step away from the elevators," Rigg announced, his voice booming across the marble lobby. He didn't lead with a question. He led with a command. Eleanor looked up from her tablet, her expression mild but confused. She lowered the device and turned to face the officer. "Excuse me. I said step away from the elevators. We got a call about a disturbance. You need to come with me to the front desk." Rigg stopped 3 feet from her, invading her personal space, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Officer, I'm not sure who called you, but I am certainly not causing a disturbance," Eleanor said, her voice steady. It was the voice of a woman who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. "I am waiting for a colleague." "You're loitering in a private office building," Rigg snapped. "This is for tenants and employees only. You don't look like you work here." Eleanor Vance had spent 30 years building an empire, and she had little patience for incompetence. But she also knew the dangers of dealing with an agitated police officer. "I don't work here in the traditional sense, officer. I own the building. My name is Eleanor Vance." Rigg let out a short, derisive laugh. "Right. And I'm the mayor of Chicago. Let's go. Move it." To understand the magnitude of this mistake, you have to understand who Eleanor Vance was. She wasn't just a wealthy woman. She was an institution. Born on the south side of Chicago, she had started her career as a paralegal, saving every dime to buy a single, rundown duplex. Over 3 decades, she had leveraged that single property into a real estate portfolio that spanned 4 states. Meridian Plaza was her crown jewel, a 60-story testament to her persistence and business acumen. She was known in the boardroom as the architect because she didn't just buy buildings, she restructured entire neighborhoods. She was meticulous. Her employees knew her as a boss who expected perfection but rewarded loyalty. She knew the names of the janitorial staff in her buildings. She sent holiday gifts to her long-term tenants. She served on the boards of 3 major museums and advised the city council on urban development. At 54, she had reached a point in her life where she no longer felt the need to prove her worth to anyone. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to fear. That Tuesday morning, Eleanor was visiting Meridian Plaza for a specific reason. She was personally overseeing the installation of a new art installation in the lobby, a project she was funding to support local artists. She had arrived early before her team to take in the space and see how the light hit the atrium walls. She loved this building. It was the physical manifestation of her life's work. When she told Officer Rigg that she owned the building, she wasn't boasting. She was stating a fact, one that could be easily verified. But Rigg wasn't interested in verification. He was interested in dominance. He saw a black woman in a coat he didn't recognize standing in a high-value target area, and his bias filled in the rest of the story. She was a scammer. She was homeless. She was looking for an open office to steal laptops. Rigg didn't see the tailored stitching of her coat. He didn't see the expensive tablet. He didn't hear the educated diction in her voice. He saw a suspect. And for a man like Kyle Rigg, a suspect who talked back was a suspect who needed to be taught a lesson. The person who had set this chain of events in motion was Greg Alston. At 39 years old, Alston was a portfolio manager for a mid-sized hedge fund that leased the 42nd floor of Meridian Plaza. He was the kind of tenant who complained if the lobby temperature was 1 degree off, or if the elevator took more than 15 seconds to arrive. He drove a Porsche, wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, and carried a deep-seated paranoia about outsiders ruining the exclusivity of his workplace. Alston had walked into the lobby at 8:40 a.m. He had seen Eleanor standing near the executive lift. He didn't recognize her. He didn't stop to ask the concierge who she was. He simply saw a black woman who wasn't wearing a security uniform or a cleaning smock, and he decided she didn't belong. He pulled out his phone and called 911. "There's a suspicious person at Meridian Plaza," Alston had told the dispatcher. "She's lurking by the elevators. She looks like she's casing the place. You need to send someone before she slips upstairs." He didn't describe any criminal behavior because there wasn't any. He described his own discomfort, and that was enough for the dispatcher to send a unit. Officer Kyle Rigg responded to the call with a history that should have precluded him from ever wearing a badge. In his 6 years on the force, he had accumulated 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy, but a disturbing number involved allegations of racial profiling. He had a reputation in his precinct as a cowboy, an officer who preferred to make arrests first and ask questions later. His supervisors knew he was a liability. The city attorneys knew he was a lawsuit waiting to happen. But the police union was strong, and the disciplinary process was slow. Rigg had learned how to game the system. He knew that as long as he claimed he feared for his safety or suspected a crime, he would be protected. Do you think officers with more than 10 complaints should be automatically placed on desk duty? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. When Rigg arrived at Meridian Plaza, he was already primed for a confrontation. The dispatcher had used the code for suspicious person, which Rigg interpreted as criminal in progress. He didn't see Eleanor Vance, the philanthropist and CEO. He saw the suspicious person Greg Alston had conjured in his mind, and when Eleanor challenged him, Rigg's ego took over. He wasn't going to let a woman, especially a black woman, tell him how to do his job. "I'm giving you a lawful order," Rigg barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "ID. Now." Eleanor sighed, the sound of a woman who was disappointed but not surprised. "Officer, I am happy to show you my identification. It is in my bag." She moved her hand slowly toward her luxury tote bag on the bench next to her. "Don't reach," Rigg yelled, his hand dropping to the butt of his gun. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The lobby went silent. The hum of conversation stopped. People froze mid-stride. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward the elevator bank. "I am reaching for my identification, which you just asked for," Eleanor said, freezing her movement. Her heart was beating faster now, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering anger. "I also have the biometric keycard for this building. It will open any door in this tower. If you will allow me to show you—" "I don't need to see your fake keycard," Rigg interrupted, stepping closer. "Anyone can print a fake ID. Anyone can steal a keycard. You think I was born yesterday? Janitors don't use the executive lift, lady. You're trespassing." "Janitor," Eleanor repeated, her voice dropping an octave. "Officer, look at me. Look at where we are. I am the owner of Meridian Plaza. You are currently standing on my property. I am asking you to lower your voice and call your supervisor." "I am the supervisor right now," Rigg sneered, "and I'm telling you that you're leaving." "I am not leaving," Eleanor said firmly. "I am waiting for my CFO. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. If you touch me, you will regret it." That was the wrong thing to say to Kyle Rigg. To him, an assertion of rights sounded like a threat. The audience in the lobby was growing. Phones were coming out. Rigg could feel the eyes on him. He felt his authority slipping, and he knew only one way to get it back: force. "That's it," Rigg said. "You're under arrest." He didn't wait for her to comply. He lunged forward, grabbing Eleanor's left wrist. "What are you doing?" Eleanor cried out, pulling back instinctively. "Do not touch me." "Stop resisting," Rigg shouted. He spun her around with unnecessary violence, wrenching her arm behind her back. Eleanor winced as pain shot through her shoulder. This was a woman who had never been in a physical fight in her life, a woman of dignity and grace being manhandled like a violent criminal. "I am not resisting," Eleanor said, her voice loud and clear for the witnesses. "I am complying under duress. I am Eleanor Vance. I own this building. Someone record this." "Shut up!" Rigg hissed in her ear. He grabbed her other wrist and slammed the handcuffs on. The metal clicked shut tight against her skin. Greg Alston, the man who had called 911, was standing near the turnstiles, watching with a smug expression. He folded his arms, satisfied that the police were doing their job. He didn't know that he was watching the destruction of his own career in real time. "You are making a mistake," Eleanor said, her face pressed against the cold marble wall where Rigg had pushed her. "A very expensive mistake. The only mistake was you thinking you could hustle in my district," Rigg said. He yanked her away from the wall. "Let's go." He marched her through the lobby. Eleanor Vance, the woman who signed the checks for the building's maintenance, the woman who approved the leases for the businesses watching her, was paraded past her own tenants in handcuffs. She held her head high despite the humiliation. She made eye contact with the security guard at the front desk, a new hire who looked terrified and confused, unsure if he should intervene against a police officer. "Call my attorney," Eleanor said to the guard as she passed. "Call David Ross. Tell him I'm being arrested." The guard nodded frantically, reaching for the phone. Rigg shoved her through the revolving doors and out into the cool October air. He pushed her toward his squad car, opened the back door, and guided her inside. She had to duck her head to avoid hitting the frame. As the door slammed shut, separating her from the world she had built, Eleanor took a deep breath. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. The ride to the 4th precinct took 15 minutes. Rigg didn't speak. He turned up the radio, drowning out the silence. He thought he had just bagged a defiant trespasser. He was already mentally writing his report. Suspect was belligerent, refused to leave, claimed to own the property, resisted arrest. When they arrived at the station, Rigg pulled Eleanor out of the car and walked her into the booking area. It was a busy morning. Officers were processing a shoplifter and a drunk driver. Rigg steered Eleanor to the bench and sat her down. "Sit tight," he said. "I've got paperwork." The watch commander on duty was Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 56 years old, a veteran who was counting the days to retirement. He was drinking coffee and reviewing the night shift logs when Rigg walked in with a woman in a charcoal wool coat and a silk blouse. Miller looked up. He squinted. He looked again. He knew that face. He had seen it in the newspaper just last week. Chicago Business Journal Eleanor Vance donates $2 million to Public Library Fund. He had seen her at the mayor's charity gala where he had worked security detail. Miller's blood ran cold. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Rigg," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "Who is that trespasser from Meridian Plaza?" Rigg said, grabbing a clipboard. "Refused to leave. Claimed she owned the place. Standard mental case or scammer. I got her for trespassing and resisting." Miller walked around the desk. He walked up to Eleanor Vance, who was sitting with perfect posture on the metal bench, her hands cuffed behind her back. "Ma'am." Miller set his throat dry. "I am Sergeant Miller. May I ask your name?" Eleanor looked at him. Her eyes were hard as flint. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am the owner of Meridian Plaza and Vance Properties. Your officer refused to look at my identification, refused to verify my ownership, and assaulted me in my own lobby." Miller closed his eyes for a brief second. He felt a headache forming instantly behind his eyes. He turned to Rigg. "Rigg, give me the keys." "Sarge, she's... Give me the keys." Miller roared, his face turning red. The entire room went silent. Rigg, startled, handed over the handcuff keys. Miller immediately unlocked Eleanor's cuffs. "Ms. Vance, I am so sorry," Miller said, his hands shaking slightly. "Please come to my office. Can I get you some water, coffee?" "I don't want water," Eleanor said, rubbing her wrists where red welts were forming. "I want my lawyer, and I want this officer's badge number." Rigg stood there confused. "Sarge, what's going on?" "She was loitering." "You idiot," Miller hissed, leaning in close to Rigg's face. "That is Eleanor Vance. She owns half the damn skyline. She probably pays more in taxes in 1 year than you'll earn in a lifetime. You arrested the building owner for trespassing." Rigg's face went pale. The color drained out of him as the reality of the situation crashed down. The confidence, the arrogance, the swagger, it all evaporated. He looked at Eleanor, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the clothes, the watch, the demeanor. I didn't know," Rigg stammered. "You didn't check," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You didn't ask. You assumed." By noon, the story was everywhere. The video footage from the lobby had been uploaded to social media by 3 different witnesses. It was trending on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Chicago cop arrests black billionaire in her own building. Eleanor Vance handcuffed. The fallout was swift and brutal. Eleanor's legal team, led by David Ross, descended on the precinct like a pack of wolves. They didn't just want an apology, they wanted blood. They filed a lawsuit that afternoon. Unlawful arrest, false imprisonment, assault, battery, civil rights violations, defamation. The mayor called Eleanor personally to apologize. The police superintendent issued a statement condemning the arrest. Officer Kyle Rigg was placed on administrative leave before his shift even ended. But Eleanor wasn't done. She had another score to settle. She requested the security logs from Meridian Plaza. She wanted to know who made the call. The name Greg Alston and his hedge fund, Apex Capital, appeared on the report. Eleanor picked up the phone and called her leasing director. "Pull up the lease for Apex Capital on the 42nd floor," Eleanor instructed. "Look for the morality clause, the one that states tenants must not engage in conduct that brings disrepute to the building or harasses other occupants." "I have it here, Ms. Vance," the director said. "Good. Trigger it. I want them out. Give them 30 days to vacate. And tell Mr. Alston that if he wants to contest it, I will personally fund the legal battle until his grandchildren are bankrupt. Greg Alston received the eviction notice the next morning. His partners at the hedge fund were furious. The bad publicity from being the man who called the cops on Eleanor Vance was causing investors to pull their money. Alston was fired 2 days later. He had tried to protect his exclusive space, and in doing so, he had lost his place in it entirely. The legal battle against the city took 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. The bodycam footage showed Rigg refusing to look at Eleanor's ID. It showed his aggressive tone. It showed him mocking her. It was a textbook case of implicit bias. Rigg saw a black woman and couldn't conceive of a world where she was his superior. The city settled for $6.5 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a wrongful arrest in Chicago's history. Eleanor announced immediately that every cent of the settlement would go toward a new legal defense fund for victims of racial profiling who didn't have her resources. Officer Kyle Rigg was fired. The review board found that his actions were indefensible and rooted in discriminatory policing. His name was added to the decertification list, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state of Illinois again. At 32, his career was over. During the final city council hearing on police reform, Eleanor Vance took the stand. The room was packed. Cameras flashed as she adjusted the microphone. She looked impeccable as always, but her eyes held a deep sadness. "I am a wealthy woman," Eleanor began, her voice echoing in the silent chamber. "I have resources, connections, and power. And yet when Officer Rigg looked at me, he didn't see any of that. He saw a color. He saw a stereotype. And because of that, he felt entitled to strip me of my freedom." She paused, looking directly at the council members. "If this can happen to me in the lobby of a building I built with my own hands, imagine what happens to the young man on the corner who has nothing. Imagine what happens to the nurse waiting for the bus. They don't have David Ross on speed dial. They don't have the mayor's phone number. They just have the trauma. We cannot buy our way out of racism," Eleanor concluded. "We can only root it out, and that starts with officers who understand that their badge is a shield, not a sword." The room erupted in applause. The story of Eleanor Vance and Officer Rigg is a reminder that bias is a blinder. It stops us from seeing the truth that is standing right in front of us. Rigg was so sure of his world view that he couldn't see the reality that he was the guest and she was the host. Kyle Rigg is now working in construction. Greg Alston left the financial sector and moved to a different state. Eleanor Vance continues to build to own and to lead, but she never walks through her lobby without a slight tightening in her chest, a memory of the cold metal cuffs and the feeling of helplessness that no amount of money can fully erase. This story isn't just about a bad apple. It's about a tree that needs pruning. It asks us to look at our own assumptions. Who belongs where? And why do we feel the need to police spaces that aren't ours? The silence in that lobby when the handcuffs clicked shut is a silence we need to fill with action. It's a silence that asks, who are we protecting and who are we hurting? Thank you for watching. What do you think is the best way to hold officers accountable for this kind of bias? Should settlements come from police pension funds instead of tax dollars? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in this conversation. If this story moved you, please like and share it. We need to keep shining a light on these moments so that one day, no one has to prove they belong in a space they own. Stay safe, look out for one another, and I'll see you in the next video.